of on the back of what you've just announced, with the fact that Donald Trump has now got both houses, he's also enlisted Elon Musk, who said he's going to get rid of regulations because he's got his own business that's facing fines and stuff, as somebody was saying to Andrew Marr earlier. Is that not a reason that the world should be scared as well? Because obviously that means he'll be able to push for anything he wants, especially with Ukraine, okay, but also with the health and safety of the people in America, having to, getting rid of regulations and just burning everything up like that. Is America ever going to be the same again?
So to sum that up, are you saying sort of should the people of the US and the world be afraid of having Donald Trump and him having limited opposition?
Absolutely, because he's going to be able to pass everything through, isn't he? He's not going to have anybody to stop him. And then we've got Elon Musk definitely getting rid of these regulations, which is going to benefit him and not benefit people. That could be health and safety, could be anything. So there you go.
Now, Yasmin, I imagine you have a view on this.
Every word you've uttered, I agree with. I think we should be very scared, but I do feel very anxious for a leader who already, hated any kind of opposition, now has the mandate to do as he pleases with himself and his cabal. And God knows how it's all going to map out. But it's interesting, some states, because America is very complicated, the individual states do still have a lot of power and some degree of independence. And I think it was California yesterday, and one or two others who said they're not going to implement, for example, the deport everybody policy or some of the stuff that he used during his campaign. So, democracy is a complicated thing. And in America, it's a particularly fine balance between the federal government and the state. So my hope is that since the House of Representatives and Senate are now his, that the resistance, or at least some resistance, will come from some of the states.
Samuel.
Yeah, I think I have a very different view, to be honest. I think Donald Trump has a really clear mandate. And I think in America, some of the reasons why they have challenges is because very often there is this tension between a president and the Senate or Congress. So actually having the clarity of who is ultimately responsible for the big decisions can only be good for America. I think that...
Well, it depends what those decisions are, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, but I suppose with Donald Trump, what you have is someone who's going to try to be someone that brings about reform to things like public services, etc. Clearly, the Americans overall have a strong sense of feeling about things like migration, or else they would not vote for Donald Trump. On the international stage, I think there is probably more nuance. I think Donald Trump will probably be good for the American economy. Will it be good for the global economy? It's a slightly different answer to that. And then also when you think about what is happening in Gaza and you think about what is happening in Ukraine, Joe Biden hasn't been able to shift the dial. And so I just wonder, probably slightly controversially, whether or not somebody like Donald Trump will be able to make more progress, which will ultimately result in less people dying, which I think is far more important than some of the other trade-offs that might be required when you have to enter negotiations with people like Putin, who obviously hasn't been quite enamored to America's position on the subject of how you bring about peace in that region.
Yasmin, just before I go to Michael, Labour got a massive majority at the general election. I mean, they have the mandate, certainly in seats, not necessarily in vote share, to do whatever they like over the next 4 years. I don't remember you expressing similar concerns then.
I have. Go and read my columns. Go and read my tweets.
I do read your tweets, but I
have been very critical of Keir Starmer's position and on a lot of stuff. Gaza most of all. Gaza, absolutely most of all. But I have to say, Samuel, that your faith in the big leader, the big man leader, just read history and find out what happens when you get someone with this full a mandate and no opposition really to speak of. What happens next? Just know your history.
Well, I think for the sake of balance and to sound slightly more diplomatic than that, I would say, Yasmin, you were correct in the statement you made earlier around America being far more complicated in terms of, and large in terms of how they govern. So there's a federated state. So Donald Trump won't have the power to do absolutely everything that he wants. But on the big ticket items around how you bring down inflation, around how you make people more comfortable about America's migration policy, ultimately, I think sometimes you do need someone that's going to be a bit more radical in their perspectives. Business as usual has resulted in people not being able to feed their families in the States.
No, nobody said business as usual. I didn't say business as usual. But a big, this idea of the big, powerful leader, which is taking over across the world. You have Modi in India, you have Orban in Hungary. The appeal of the big, strong, usually male leader. But just know your history is all I'm saying.
Michael Shanks, I'm sure you'd quite like to sit this one out because I know it's quite awkward for Labour ministers to talk about Donald Trump nowadays, but go ahead.
No, it's not awkward. I think I would take Samuel's line, though, that I'm going to give the diplomatic answer, as you would expect. But look,
probably good for your career.
The reality genuinely is that the American people voted decisively for Donald Trump to become president again. I actually thought what was remarkable today for the world to see was Donald Trump in the Oval Office with Joe Biden. And I think whatever your view on the politics of either of them, and there'll be plenty of people in this country that would disagree with Joe Biden as well and things, the fact that the two of them were able to sit in that meeting and have a fairly amicable conversation when they're clearly quite significant opponents, and that there will be a peaceful transfer of power, I think is still a remarkable thing for us to recognise when there's so many countries around the world that don't have that.
It shouldn't be, though, should it? And it's only remarkable because of what happened 4 years ago.
Exactly, and if it had been the other way, what do you think Donald Trump would have done?
It was the other way and it didn't happen, did it?
I think the point is, like, whatever people's view in this country is, the American people have made a choice and that's what will now happen. I think what's important for us is we will need to persuade the Trump administration of our priorities. The Prime Minister's been in Azerbaijan this week trying to deliver some climate leadership. That's an area where we're going to have to convince the United States of our arguments. We're not going to just give up on that. But there's countries right around the world, not just Donald Trump, where we have to convince them that climate leadership is important. So this is important that we persuade leaders. We're going to agree on some things, we're going to disagree on some things. I suspect actually in government, the Trump administration will find they can't do all the things they might have said they're going to do. Reality is quite different often for government. But I think the United States is an incredibly important ally for us. They're an incredibly important leader in the global economy and in international relations. We're going to have to work with them, and that's what this government will do.